They called it a toy, not regulation, not standard issue, not what an American officer was supposed to carry into combat. It looked like something you would take deer hunting in Illinois, not into the suffocating jungle of Guadalcanal. On January 22, 1943, Second Lieutenant John George lay inside the crumbling remains of a captured Japanese bunker west of Point Cruz. 240 yards away stood a line of banyan trees. He was watching them through a civilian hunting scope. Within 4 days, 11 Japanese snipers would be dead. But to understand how that happened, you first have to understand Guadalcanal. John George was 27 years old. Before the war, he was not a professional soldier. He was a competitive marksman. In 1939, he became the youngest Illinois state champion at 1,000 yards. That is not a casual achievement. At 1,000 yards, even minor wind variations shift impact by feet. Competitive long-range shooting demands breath discipline, controlled trigger squeeze, and absolute patience. George had saved 2 years of National Guard pay to purchase a Winchester Model 70. Bolt action, 5-round internal magazine, chambered in .30-06, mounted with a Lyman Alaskan 2.5 power scope on a Griffin and Howe mount. To trained riflemen, it was a precision instrument. To many officers, it was a civilian hunting rifle. The standard infantry weapon was the M1 Garand, semi-automatic, 8 rounds, reliable, but without magnification. When George arrived with his Winchester, some mocked him. His commanding officer reportedly ordered him to leave it behind. George refused. He believed precision mattered more than volume of fire. At that moment in 1943, the Army did not share that belief. By early 1943, Guadalcanal had already become one of the most strategically important battlegrounds in the Pacific. The island itself was not inherently valuable. What mattered was Henderson Field. From that single airstrip, American aircraft could strike Japanese shipping lanes, supplying their forces throughout the Solomon Islands chain. Control of Henderson Field meant air superiority. Air superiority meant control of supply, and supply meant survival. The Marines had landed in August 1942 in the first major Allied offensive against Japanese forces. For months, they fought brutal defensive actions, night assaults, artillery bombardments, constant air raids. They endured disease, starvation, and exhaustion. By December, many Marine units were physically spent. The U.S. Army's 132nd Infantry Regiment arrived to relieve them. But the campaign was not over. The fighting had simply changed form. Mount Austin, a steep jungle-covered hill mass dominating the western approaches, required weeks of bloody close combat to secure. Fortified bunkers, interlocking fields of fire, hidden machine gun nests. Even after the hill fell, Japanese resistance did not disappear. It adapted. Instead of holding fixed defensive positions, Japanese forces began operating in dispersed jungle elements, and from those trees they began killing American soldiers one by one. Jungle warfare punishes conventional training. In open terrain, infantry are taught to scan the horizon. In jungle terrain, the horizon barely exists. Visibility can drop to 20 or 30 yards. Humidity warps wood stocks and fogs optics. Sound reflects unpredictably. A rifle shot can echo in ways that make direction almost impossible to determine. Japanese soldiers exploited elevation. They climbed massive banyan trees before dawn. Some trees rose 80 to 90 feet above the forest floor. From those heights, they could observe supply trails, patrol routes, and defensive perimeters. They did not fire often. They fired deliberately. On January 19th, a corporal was killed while filling canteens at a stream. The following day, 2 more men died on patrol. Then 3 more. 14 casualties in 3 days. The psychological effect was severe. Men began scanning every branch. Every rustle became a threat. The battalion commander needed a counter, but the U.S. Army at that time had no formal sniper doctrine equivalent to what would later develop in Korea or Vietnam. There were no specialized sniper teams, no issued optics, no counter-sniper training programs. There was only one scoped rifle in the regiment, and it was unofficial. At dawn on January 22nd, George moved alone into the remains of a captured Japanese bunker overlooking coconut groves west of Point Cruz. He brought no spotter, no radio, just ammunition, a canteen, and patience. Through 2.5 power magnification, the jungle did not suddenly become clear. It became organized. Lines, vertical trunks, intersecting branches, light breaking through canopy gaps. A sniper in a tree does not look like a man. He looks like something slightly wrong. A shape that interrupts symmetry. A branch that moves independently of wind. At approximately 9:17 in the morning, George noticed a subtle movement high in a banyan tree. There was no wind. He did not rush. He watched. Gradually, a silhouette resolved. A Japanese sniper wedged between branches, facing east toward an American supply path. George adjusted slightly for wind, exhaled, pressed the trigger. The sniper fell nearly 90 feet to the jungle floor. George did not lower the rifle. Japanese snipers often operated in pairs. Minutes later, another figure shifted lower in the canopy. 2 shots, 2 dead. Word moved quickly through the regiment. The toy rifle had just eliminated a threat that patrols had failed to suppress. The first day changed something, not just in the jungle, in the mindset of the battalion. For months, American infantry on Guadalcanal had been reacting, digging in, absorbing fire, advancing slowly through fortified positions. But counter-sniper warfare is different. It is intimate, it is deliberate, and it is psychological. By the morning of January 23rd, the remaining Japanese shooters knew something had shifted. The trees were no longer safe. George returned to a new concealed position before sunrise. He did not reuse the same bunker. He understood a simple principle. After a sniper fires, that ground is compromised. Rain fell heavily that morning. Humidity thickened. Moisture collected on lenses. In jungle combat, optics are not clean instruments. They fog. They collect debris. They require constant care. When visibility returned, George resumed scanning. He did not search randomly. He prioritized areas overlooking supply routes and habitual movement patterns. Snipers choose terrain with purpose. They watch what men must use, not what they might use. By mid-morning, he identified another elevated shooter. The movement was minimal. A slight realignment of weight. A leaf displaced. He waited longer this time. Patience confirms targets. He fired. Another body dropped through the canopy. Mortar fire followed shortly afterward. The Japanese had triangulated his likely firing position. The first shell landed wide. The second bracketed closer. The third destroyed the bunker he had occupied minutes before. He had already relocated. Constant movement became part of survival. Counter-sniper operations require flexibility. A stationary shooter becomes predictable. George understood that his greatest vulnerability was not marksmanship. It was detection. The Winchester Model 70 was bolt action. 5 rounds, manual cycling between shots. The M1 Garand, by contrast, allowed rapid follow-up fire. 8 rounds, semi-automatic. In close jungle engagements, volume matters. But in elevated precision engagements, control matters more. A bolt-action rifle enforces rhythm. It forces the shooter to reacquire sight picture deliberately. It slows impulse. In counter-sniper work, haste is error. Error is death. George was not engaging charging infantry. He was engaging concealed marksmen. The difference is critical. The Garand dominated conventional firefights. The Winchester excelled in deliberate shot placement. This was not a debate about superiority. It was about context, and context favored precision. By the end of the second day, George had been alone for extended periods. No spotter to confirm wind, no one to verify distance, no one to validate target identification. Isolation intensifies perception. Every sound becomes magnified. Every insect, buzz distracts. Fatigue erodes clarity. Dehydration slows cognition. Competitive shooting prepares a man for control under pressure, but combat adds variables no firing range can replicate. There is no time limit bell, no controlled environment, only waiting, and the knowledge that someone may already be watching you. By nightfall, additional snipers had been eliminated. Estimates suggested that most of the organized sniper presence west of Point Cruz had been reduced significantly, but one remained, and that one adapted. On January 24th, George chose a new concealed position among rocks south of his previous hide. He understood that any elevated tree near earlier engagement sites would now be suspect. This time, movement appeared lower. A sniper in a palm tree at a relatively obvious angle. Too obvious. Experienced marksmen recognize bait. An exposed shooter can draw counterfire toward a predetermined kill zone. George widened his scan, higher, farther. A second silhouette, 90 feet up in a banyan tree, watching the position George had previously occupied. The decoy was real, but the primary shooter was above. George fired at the lower man first, removed the distraction, then shifted immediately. The second sniper reacted. Slight repositioning. Too late. 2 more shots. Machine gun fire erupted moments later. Rounds struck rock edges near his position. The Japanese had supporting infantry covering sectors. This was no longer isolated counter-sniper work. It was escalation. George relocated again. The last sniper changed tactics entirely. No elevation, no obvious concealment in branches. He moved on the ground, deliberate, patient, hunting. For the first time, George was not simply scanning. He was anticipating pursuit. He chose concealment within a shell crater partially filled with stagnant water. Submersion reduces silhouette. It also reduces comfort. Mosquitoes, mud, restricted movement. The sniper approached George's previously used firing location. Careful, methodical, searching for disturbance. George waited, breathing controlled. When the sniper turned slightly, presenting his back, George rose just enough, fired once. The man collapsed, but the engagement did not end there. Supporting soldiers moved toward the body. Close-range rifle fire followed. George fired again. 2 more enemy soldiers fell in a rapid succession. He withdrew under covering terrain, moving north toward friendly lines. At approximately late morning, he re-entered American perimeter positions. He reported 11 sniper kills over 4 days, 12 rounds fired, 2 remaining. Combat records from jungle warfare are imperfect. Precise timestamps are difficult to verify. Environmental chaos complicates documentation. Some historians debate the exact sequence of events, but operational impact is measurable. Sniper-related casualties in that sector decreased dramatically. Morale improved. The battalion commander reportedly asked one question: "Can you train others?" That question matters more than exact tallies, because it signals institutional recognition. Following the engagement, a sniper section was organized within the regiment. George trained selected marksmen. He emphasized patience over speed, observation over aggression, camouflage over visibility, precision over volume. The concept was simple. If one disciplined shooter could neutralize elevated threats, multiple trained shooters could control wider sectors. Reports suggest that over subsequent operations, the section recorded dozens of confirmed enemy kills with no friendly losses during that period. More important than numbers was method. The Army began to reconsider the role of optics in jungle warfare. It was not a sweeping doctrinal revolution, but it was a shift. George later served in the China-Burma-India theater with Merrill's Marauders. Different terrain, different enemy, different logistical constraints. The Winchester remained part of his equipment for a time, but jungle warfare in Burma demanded mobility. Weight became a liability. Engagement distances varied. Precision still mattered, but context always determines tool. After the war, George wrote Shots, fired in anger. The tone was not boastful, it was instructional. He described not heroics, but lessons. Lessons about terrain, about patience, about discipline. Today, his Winchester Model 70 rests behind museum glass. It looks ordinary, polished wood, blued steel, a hunting rifle. Visitors pass without pause. They do not see the 4 days west of Point Cruz. They do not see 14 American dead before January 22nd. They do not see how elevation became vulnerability. And they do not see how one disciplined marksman forced adaptation inside a conventional infantry regiment. War in the 20th century became industrial. Artillery, armor, air power, mass logistics. But even in industrial war, there are moments where individual skill alters local reality. For 4 days in January 1943, precision overcame harassment. Patience overcame concealment. And a rifle once mocked as a toy reshaped a battlefield sector. Not by spectacle, but by discipline.